2 weeks before my wedding, my father told me I was stealing attention from my sister. So I chose the man who had actually raised me. The kitchen clock in our old house in Charlotte ticked like a scolding metronome. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, making the marble counter gleam in a way that always felt a little too cold, like a dentist's tray. My coffee had gone tepid. My father sat at the end of the table with his hands cupped around an empty mug, the way you hold something you're afraid will fall even though there is nothing in it to spill. "Your sister Olivia is uncomfortable with all the attention you're getting," he said, eyes at my shoulder, never my face. "I've been thinking about the ceremony, and I don't think I should walk you down the aisle. My name is Charlotte Hamilton. I was born in this house, learned to ride a bike on the sidewalk out front, and memorized the sound of the air conditioner starting up in July like a hymn. I am 28, a marketing director at Sundale Financial, and I have spent a year turning lists and budgets and Pinterest boards into a wedding. I did not put father bags out to protect fragile feelings of younger sister on any checklist. So you won't walk me." I kept my voice even, like a banker asking for identification. "It's complicated," he said. "Olivia has been upset. I need to support her." As my father said those words, a hum from the refrigerator deepened, and the great old grandfather clock in the hallway answered with its own steady heartbeat, the sound I'd fallen asleep to in a bed that used to be mine. The house, as always, stayed steady. People change around it. It stays the same. I took in the room like a photograph I wanted to file away for later. The fruit bowl with 2 bruised bananas and a perfect green pear. The taped birthday card from my 6-year-old niece on the cabinet door. The faint ring of coffee on the table where my father had set his mug without a coaster. I remember the thick feeling in my chest, the one that comes when an old truth returns wearing new clothes. This was not the first time my father chose Olivia's comfort over my milestones. It was only the first time he had chosen it on a day the world would notice. "Thank you for showing me what matters to you," I said. Then I stood, because standing is sometimes the only way to keep from breaking. Down the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Inside, an old man liked to read biographies with a yellow lamp shining down on pages that smelled like libraries and patience. He had braided my hair for 3rd grade picture day when my father woke late. He had taught me to waltz at 12 by counting 1, 2, 3 across the kitchen tiles while the radio played a station too old for my friends. He had clapped for me in cafetoriums and gyms when my father forgot the time. He is my grandfather, Theodore Hamilton, and he is more than that word suggests. He is my father in every way that counts. I lifted my phone. "Grandpa," I said when he answered, "I have a question. The kitchen heat, the hum, the clock, my father breathing without looking at me, everything receded as my grandfather said, 'I am listening, sweetheart. Would you walk me down the aisle?' There was a pause, not of uncertainty, but of reverence, like a man taking off his hat in a church. Then his voice came back with the steadiness I had learned to borrow. 'With all the love I have.' I turned, and my father finally looked at me. He could see the decision wearing my face. He could see the hallway where the man he'd always treated like a placeholder was about to become the headline. "You don't have to do this," he said, a plea hiding under the scold. I already did. The hallway smelled faintly of furniture polish and old paper. I knocked softly on the door. My grandfather never closed all the way. "Come in," he called, and I stepped into a pool of warm light and 1,000 afternoons. He was in his chair by the window, the one with the arms rubbed smooth by hands and time. On his lap lay a book about Winston Churchill, face down on a chapter where a stubborn man made an impossible choice. He put a ribbon in the pages and set it aside like you set aside a worry you cannot fix tonight. "Tell me," he said, and I told him. I told him about the kitchen and the coffee and my father and Olivia, about attention and comfort, and how exactly 2 words can make a daughter into a problem to be solved. I told him about the aisle I had always pictured, walking with a man beside me who looked like the one in the stories. Then I told the truth. The man beside me had never been the one in the stories. The man who was had been down this hallway all along, His eyes filled but did not spill. His hands, those careful hands that had tied my shoelaces in a good double knot for 20 years, covered mine. Your grandmother would be smiling, he said, and I swear the light in the room changed like someone lifted a veil. We spent the next hour in little decisions that felt like ceremony. He asked what color tie would match the flowers. He asked where the sanctuary steps were steep and where he should pause if I needed a breath. He asked me not to worry about his cane. I haven't needed it much this summer, he said, then added, I will practice. Something in my chest loosened enough to let laughter out. The house, having heard our choice, settled around us with that deep old house sigh. I could hear my father in the kitchen opening cabinets and closing them, like a man who has lost something essential and cannot name it. He tried to fix it later. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed with the kind of messages people send when they are rearranging a story to cast themselves in a better light. He started with guilt. I raised you. He tried anger. This is disrespectful. He tried bargaining. What if I walk you halfway? He never tried the one thing that might have worked. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Olivia called 3 times. Her voice had an edge it had carried since we were children, and she learned that tears were currency. You are destroying our family, she said. Dad is heartbroken. Dad made a choice, I said. Now we all live in it. You are choosing Grandpa over him. I am honoring the man who showed up. That is not a choice against someone else. That is a choice for the truth. Silence. Then, everyone is going to talk about this. Yes, I said. Let them. I did not spend the week fighting. I spent it preparing. Grandpa came to the church with me on a Wednesday afternoon so he could see how the light falls at 2 and where the aisle narrows by the 3rd pew. He brought his walking stick, an old cedar thing that had belonged to his father, smoothed by 3 generations of palms. He was careful on the steps, practicing the exact place he'd stop so I could adjust my dress. A quiet woman from the office unlocked the side door for us and stood at the back, watching with that expression people wear when they know they are seeing something that will turn into a story told later. Will it be too hard? I asked. The steps, the distance? I have walked harder miles for you, he said, and it did not sound like a sacrifice to him. It sounded like joy. I asked Reverend Matthews to change the words. At the ceremony, would you please introduce him as the father figure who raised me with unconditional love, I said. That is the truth, the Reverend answered. We speak it gladly here. On the way home, the sun sat low over Park Road, pouring honey-colored light over the tops of cars. Wind lifted the ends of my hair through the open window. The city had that late afternoon scent, hot tar, cut grass, the sweet whiff of someone's dryer sheet drifting invisible, familiar. My grandfather hummed a tune that might have been from the 40s. At a stoplight, he reached over and squeezed my hand, not to reassure me, but to share the quiet certainty that we were doing something right. The night before the wedding, I slept in the room where he had tucked me in after thunderstorms. My dress hung on the closet door like a white secret. The house creaked once at midnight. The sound of wood remembering, and I felt so calm I almost laughed. Calm is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of decision. Morning. Coffee, exactly the way I like it. Grandpa brought it to my door without knocking, as if we had rehearsed for this day for 20 years. The mug was warm against my palms, the smell of cinnamon, a small ceremony of its own. He wore his new navy suit and a tie we had found at a little shop where the clerk said, "That shade looks like loyalty." He looked younger in it, or perhaps he looked exactly his age. 82 and entirely himself. "You are luminous," he said, when I stepped out in my dress, and the pride in his voice made my throat ache. We drove to the church with the windows cracked, the morning cool and bright, the sky the kind of blue painters spend years trying to mix. In the bridal room, I could hear cars pulling into the lot and the muffled laughter of cousins. My maid of honor, Jessica, fixed a stray curl with the tenderness of a woman who had watched you cry in a dorm bathroom and knows how you like your eyeliner. My hands did not shake when I pinned a small ribbon inside the hem of my dress with my grandmother's initials stitched on it. The fabric was smooth against my fingers, cool and heavy, and somehow alive. The door opened. Grandpa stepped in, and even the makeup artist stopped moving for a second, like a clock forgetting to tick. He looked at me as if he were drinking water after walking through a desert. "Ready, my dear?" he asked. "Ready, Grandpa." From the hallway, music. A familiar hymn woven with piano and strings. The scent of lilies and beeswax polish drifted in as the side door opened. We stood together behind the oak double doors that lead into the sanctuary. And in that moment, I felt my mother with us, like light on a wall. He put my hand on his arm. His sleeve fabric was finely woven, smooth under my fingers, and beneath it, the muscle of his forearm felt sure and warm. He took one breath in, one breath out, and the doors opened. The sanctuary glowed. Afternoon spilled through stained glass like melted jewels, reds and golds and blue squares that fell across polished pews in patches like quilts. The aisle stretched ahead, a bright river to the altar. Faces turned. A hush traveled through the room like wind through a wheat field. In the third row on the left, my father sat with his hands together, fingers laced, knuckles white. Next to him, Olivia's mouth was a pale line, her eyes almost daring mine to meet them. They did not. I looked forward. At the end of that aisle stood James, my soon-to-be husband, already crying in a way that made even the ushers smile. He wore a suit that fit him the way the word home fits a person who has finally found one. We took the first step, and the floor, which had held 100 weddings and 1,000 prayers, held us. Grandpa's pace was perfect, not slow enough to milk a scene, not fast enough to be done. In the silence, I heard the whisper of silk at my ankles, the soft drag of his stick on wood, the lovely small gasp a child made near the aisle when she saw me, like a princess in a book, come to life. Halfway down, the sunlight warmed my cheek, and I felt the exact place his grip tightened, not from weakness, but from significance. "This is where it matters," that hand said without words. I squeezed back. We kept walking. At the front, we stopped before Reverend Matthews. The microphone crackled once, then cleared. "Dearly beloved," he said, "we are gathered here today to witness the marriage of Charlotte Hamilton and James Rodriguez. Charlotte is being walked down the aisle by Theodore Hamilton, her beloved grandfather and the father figure who raised her with unconditional love." The words landed in the room the way truth does, cleanly and with relief. You could feel people exhale. A murmur moved through the crowd, not of gossip, but of recognition. "That is what this is," their eyes said. "The right thing has a name." "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the Reverend asked. Grandpa's shoulders squared. His voice was steady and clear. "Her grandmother Margaret and I do, with all our love and blessing." He lifted my veil back with careful hands, kissed my cheek with a softness that still smelled like coffee and Old Spice, and placed my hand in James's. He took his seat in the front pew, my front pew now, if we are being faithful, to meaning, and the ceremony began. Vows in the language couples have always used, I do, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer. James's voice broke once and made 3 aunts dab their eyes. I heard sniffling from the groomsmen, which they denied later. Rings slid over knuckles, warm from palms. The pastor spoke about covenant and choosing each other on ordinary Tuesdays, not only on a bright Saturday with flowers. When he pronounced us husband and wife, a cheer rose from the room, a sound like birds taking off together. We walked back down the aisle through petals and flashbulbs and out into a day that somehow smelled like cut grass and lemon cake and the rest of our lives. People hugged us in the vestibule with that joyful clumsiness of celebration, all elbows and lipstick and laughter. Through it all, I kept seeing Grandpa's face, lit from within. At the reception, the Charlotte Country Club wore string lights like jewelry. Glasses chimed. The air smelled of rosemary and butter and something sweet with berries. Music threaded through conversation, a band doing old standards with a sincerity I admire. On the head table beside the flowers, a small place card read Theodore, printed in the same calligraphy as father of the bride would have been. People found him. Old neighbors shook his hand, told him they always knew. My co-workers said they had never seen me so sure. My great-aunt Helen, the family matriarch, leaned on her cane and told him loudly enough for the next 2 tables to hear, "You were always the real father in Charlotte's life. Everyone knows it. You earned this." Across the room, my father flinched a little. He sat with Olivia and her husband and their little girl, stirring water with a straw like he wished it were something stronger he hadn't earned the right to drink tonight. When it was time for the toast, I stood with a paper in my hand and then folded it, because the words I needed lived in my chest and came up without reading. "Thank you for coming," I said to the room, and then, "Grandpa, thank you for showing me what a father does. You showed up. You stood by me at small plays and big decisions. You taught me to be brave in ordinary ways. Today, you walk me to my future the way you have been walking me there for 20 years. I love you. I honor you." He put his face in his hands for a second and shook his head like a man overwhelmed. When he stood, the whole room clapped before he even spoke. He didn't say much, only this: "It has been the joy of my life to watch you become yourself." During the father-daughter dance, the band played at last, and we did not overdo the irony. We simply moved. His hand at my shoulder blade, my other hand on his sleeve. The cedar walking stick leaned quietly against his chair, like an old friend who knows when to step back. People watched with the sweetness that rises when decency is seen and celebrated. My father sat very still at his table. Olivia looked down at her phone, then up, then down again, caught between a pride she couldn't admit and a narrative that had slipped out of her hands. Near the end of the night, my father walked over to me by the dessert table where a cake stood like white architecture and a platter of lemon bars that tasted like summers at my grandmother's cooled under a silver dome. He stopped short of touching me, a man approaching a doorway and unsure if he still had the key. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "I need to say something." I waited. "I made a terrible mistake," he said. "I thought I was balancing. I thought Olivia needed me more. I didn't understand what I was throwing away. I am sorry." It was the first time in my life I had heard those words from him, and they fell into me with a weight that did not crash, only settled. "Thank you," I said. "I don't know what this changes, but I hear you." He looked past me to the head table where my grandfather laughed at something James's father had said, head thrown back, joy unmeasured. "Your grandfather did something beautiful today," my father said. "He has been doing it for a long time," I answered. In the months that followed, time did what it always does. It told the truth slowly. The story of the wedding circulated through the family in the way stories do, edited by memory, embellished in places, sharpened in others. At Christmas, Aunt Helen poured tea and said, "Theodore looked 10 years younger that day." At Easter, a cousin whispered to another cousin at the buffet, "Can you believe Donald actually said he wouldn't walk her?" Olivia kept her distance, and I let her. My father called more. Sometimes we had coffee without fighting. Sometimes we canceled. A relationship formed again, not like wet concrete poured into a mold, but like a garden that might or might not take with patience and weather. Grandpa became the patriarch he had already been, only now the title matched the truth. He came to my first big client pitch and waited in the lobby with a crossword while I said words about market share and growth that would have bored him on the page but thrilled him in the telling. He helped James fix a cabinet door in our new apartment and told him a story about his own first apartment and a landlord who used chewing gum on hinges. He read to our niece on Sundays, letting her turn the pages even when she did it out of order. He lived in our lives the way he had always lived. Attentively, without grandness, steadfast. One afternoon, almost a year later, I sat on our couch with the sun coming through the blinds in quiet bars and the wedding album on my lap. The photographer had caught moments I didn't know I would need. Grandpa's hand on my arm, the exact way his fingers curved. the look on my father's face when the Reverend said father figure. Olivia's little girl, Sophia, watching me with her mouth open and absolute delight on her face. A shot of the sanctuary. After we left, empty pews bathed in colored light, petals on the floor like confetti in a street after a parade. I traced a picture where Grandpa's eyes were bright enough to reflect the windows. James came in and sat behind me, his chest warm against my back, his chin resting lightly on my head. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The choice?" "Not for a second," I said. "I don't either," he answered, and kissed the top of my hair the way Grandpa used to, a gesture that felt like a baton passed and received, an old rhythm learned by a new pair of hands. A year after the wedding, at a small family barbecue in our backyard where the Saturnella candle smelled like lemon and camp, my father helped me carry a cooler and asked if he could speak during dessert. He stood up with a paper shaking in his hand and then put it down like I had and spoke from the place where the words matter. He said he had failed me by confusing fairness with fear. He said he saw now that love is not a pie you cut smaller for someone else when one slice is enjoyed. He said he had watched my grandfather do the work he should have done and felt ashamed and grateful in the same breath. Then he said he hoped to earn, not assume, a place in this new family we were making. After, Grandpa shook his hand for a long time. "No speeches," he said. "Let's build something and let them see it." Olivia stayed away that day. She sent a text at midnight that said, "I am not ready." I texted back, "Neither am I. When you are, you know where I live. Sometimes, the only revenge you need is the life you build where the harm was supposed to live." My wedding day wasn't a spectacle of payback. It was a public declaration of a private truth. Titles don't make fathers. Presence does. When I hear people tell our family story now, they use my grandfather's first name with a softness that is almost prayer. They say, "Remember how Theodore looked at her." They say, "That's the kind of man I want to be when I'm old." When the anniversary of the wedding arrived, James and I took Grandpa to the church on a weekday when the sanctuary was empty and cool, and we sat in the front pew and said nothing. The air smelled like lime oil and old paper. The light came through the windows in squares we could sit our hands in. A custodian dusted quietly in the back. After a while, Grandpa patted my knee, stood with his stick, and walked me down the aisle one more time. "Just because," he said, and smiled. There was no music, but the clock on the wall and the faint squeak of a wood bench responding to history. We reached the front, and he said what he had said before. "With all my love and blessing." I said what I had said before. "Thank you for raising me." On the way home, we stopped for lemon bars at a bakery, where the woman behind the counter called him sir and meant it. He told her it was an important day, and she gave us one extra in a small paper bag and said, "My granddad raised me too." On the sidewalk, he ate his, with powdered sugar, dusting the corner of his lip, perfectly content. I used to think weddings were the story. Now I think they are the public caption on a longer tale. Mine began long before flowers and playlists. It began when a man sat by a girl's bed and read until she fell asleep, when he showed up in the front row of a school auditorium and clapped like she had invented sound, when he put gas in her car before she drove back to college and told her to text when she arrived, even though he knew she would forget and he would forgive. 2 weeks before my wedding, my father refused to walk me down the aisle because my sister was uncomfortable. On the day itself, the doors opened, my grandfather took my arm, and the room chose what was true. Fatherhood is not a title. It is presence. Love is proven by actions, not words. Favoritism destroys trust in a family and always brings consequences for parents and children. Setting boundaries is maturity. You have the right to stand with those who truly supported you. The strongest revenge is not punishment. It is honoring the people who were your real foundation. An apology matters only when behavior changes. Late regret does not erase what was done. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is care for your dignity and your future. Bottom line, a true family is the one that shows up and stays.